Welcome to Grace in the Shadows. This is Dr. Marla Behler and
Dr. J.
Dr. Jonathan Behler. Well, hello, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Today, we'd like to give a quick shout out to the Bronx, New York.
Yay, Bronx.
Right. Yes, we love New York. Great place to go. Great place to visit, especially at Christmas time.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. You can check us out at graceintheshadowsor.org. You can email us at drjonathan at graceintheshadowsor.org. Or you can call us at 251-244-4645. We're switching it up today.
Yes, you're going to do the jokes because, listen, folks, I was running out of dad jokes and they were getting very, very cheesy. If you didn't notice.
Yeah.
And so, Dr.
we found
Marla,
out.
Yeah.
Mom jokes are a
We're
thing.
going to swap. Go ahead. Mom jokes.
I've got some mom jokes today, so we might do this for a little while. Okay. I used to play the piano by ear, but now I just played it by mom-ery.
A second thought, maybe I should come back. Just kidding.
I tried to make a joke about a toddler bed, but then it fell apart.
Oh, my.
Okay, one more thing.
All right.
One more. I told my kids they should have been born in a different decade. They asked me why. I said, because it's cheaper by the dozen.
That's a little funny. A little bit.
All right.
Okay, we're getting there.
Okay.
All right. This day, December 23rd, in 1783, George Washington resigned as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Army.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In 1788, Maryland voted to cede a 100-square-mile area from the District of Columbia. So I guess they were all together.
I guess so.
Yeah.
All right.
1913, President Woodrow Wilson signed the act creating the Federal Reserve System.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So we're switching it up today. All right. What's our topic?
We're talking about the stages of grief. We haven't forgot Acts. We will go back to Acts. Kind of taking a break because holidays.
Holidays coming. Christmas.
This stuff's pretty practical.
Yes.
Because grief, especially around the holidays,
right,
can really be kind of pronounced and more difficult for people.
It really can be. It kind of hits you. I mean, you think about the ones you've lost, maybe relationships that have gone astray, and it kind of hits you this time of the year. It really does.
And so we're going to talk about the stages of grief and just apply people in the Bible that went through the same thing.
Okay, let's do it.
If God was going to, if people were going to make up the Bible, they wouldn't have put people being so human.
Right. True.
If they were going to make it up and create their own thing.
Right.
God allows people to be human and be real.
Yes, I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm glad too.
Yeah.
So the stages of grief are widely recognized, and they were developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in a 1969 book on death and dying.
Nice.
And so there's several stages, 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And so it doesn't have to be in that order. Sometimes you may skip one.
Right.
But throughout the Bible, we'll also find numerous examples of individuals experiencing grief in ways they reflected these stages, I believe.
Very good.
Yeah. First one's denial.
Okay.
So in the denial stage, people have difficulty accepting the reality of their loss. And they might feel numb or have trouble believing that the event or thing occurred.
Right.
And I think a biblical example of this is Job's initial denial.
Oh, yeah.
In Job 1:20-22, I mean, old Job sounds very spiritual here. But it says that, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart.
Right.
The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised, or blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Now this, if you read this, it's in Job 1:20-22, it seems very spiritual and very good.
Right.
But when you read Job and his reactions later on, it's not so spiritual.
True.
And I think this is a case of denial.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
He lost, some of the things he lost was his wealth, his health, his children.
Yep.
And he mourns deeply. And as you go through the rest of the book of Job, he never cursed God, but he certainly suffered.
Right.
And, he really expressed a lot of pain
He did.
and confusion.
Right.
Before ultimately acceptance.
Right. And I think that's part of it, because sometimes it's really hard to accept that someone is gone.
Yeah.
And you sometimes kind of trick yourself into thinking maybe they're not, and you have to basically accept it over and over until you get through that little stage.
And it doesn't just have to be about death.
No.
I mean, grief can come from losing a job.
Yep.
It can come from diagnoses. It can come from change. It
broken
can
relationships,
getting older. I mean,
right.
Yeah. I mean, so grief, that stuff comes to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anger is another stage.
Right.
I find this a lot with my patients.
I'm sure.
Anger is a very common response to loss, I think, and particularly with people who feel a sense of injustice, frustration about the circumstances they're facing.
Yeah.
And so they may direct their anger towards others, themselves, even God.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes people get angry at God for the situations that happen. And that's really hard to deal with, I think, to face when we're angry at God. I mean, because He's the one that we want to go to for comfort. And if we're angry at Him, it's hard to look at Him as a comforter. So that is a very tough stage, I think.
I think being anger is a normal response.
Right.
And I think talking to God openly about that anger.
Yeah, it's important.
God already knows you're angry.
Right.
And just because, talking through that, I believe can bring peace.
Well, just like as a parent, sometimes your kids do things that just really irritate you, make you mad, and you don't turn your back on them. You talk it through with them. And, we have to do that with God. We have to talk it through with God, and because He already knows how we feel, but not hold on to that anger, not harbor it, but take it to Him, lay it at His feet, and talk through it with Him.
I mean, because Job faced extreme loss, wealth, health.
Yeah.
Prosperity, children.
But his wife, who said, "Curse God and die." Yeah.
Well, what a woman.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is the epitome, ultimate example of health, wealth, prosperity gospel, showing that it's totally heretical.
Absolutely.
Because Job was righteous and he suffered.
Yes.
And sometimes we suffer has nothing to do with our faith.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very true.
One of the key verses here is Job 31, 18 through 19. He says, "Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? For what is our lot from God above, our heritage from the Almighty? Is it not ruin for the wicked, disaster for those who do wrong?" And so, Job was pretty angry. And, I think that Job's outburst of frustration and his questioning of God's justice reflects that sense of anger, confusion, response to loss. I also think that when we see this, Job really, like I just said earlier, was really very transparent with God about his feelings. And I think that you hear some people say, "Well, you're in sin if you're angry at God." Well, it may or may not be, but you need to be honest with God.
He already knows how you feel.
Because He already knows how you feel. Yeah. The third one is bargaining.
Yeah.
This one I find a lot.
Right.
Anger, I think anger and depression are the most common.
Yeah.
But this one is in there a lot too, is bargaining. So what are some things that people bargain, you think?
Well, a lot of times it happens before somebody dies.
Yes.
I think, well, God, if you save this person, then I will serve you the rest of my life. And, you find that a lot. And, God's not somebody to bargain with. I mean, He'll listen to what we have to say and everything. But yeah, what are some ways you've seen it?
Well, I've seen it with, diagnoses, with situations, with people's. I really think that a lot of times it is before the ultimate loss.
Right.
Just facing that.
Yeah.
The perfect example from a biblical standpoint is King David. Right. In 2 Samuel 12.
Oh, his son. Yeah. The son that he and Bathsheba had as a result of their affair, their adultery. The child was sick and was going to die, and David prayed and prayed and prayed and begged God and tore his clothes and everything, and begging him not to take his son. But God ultimately did. And then David washed off everything and
praise God.
Yeah.
And ate.
Right.
And they asked him why.
Yeah.
And he just said, I thought if I did this, paraphrasing it, that maybe God would relent.
Right.
And so you can't blame him.
And then he said, but I will see him again.
Yeah. He came to me, but I will go to him.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, as Christians, if our loved one that passes on, if that's what we're dealing with, the grief we're dealing with, if that person was a Christian, we can have that hope that they are a lot better off, and it's us that are suffering the loss because they're gone. But knowing that they're in heaven can give us comfort, I feel.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Bargaining's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my mom was sick before I was born. She was really sick.
Right.
And my dad used to smoke.
Yeah.
And he told God that if he heals my mom, he would stop smoking.
And he did.
He did.
So sometimes God will take that and say, okay.
Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
So the fourth one is depression. And I think what I see most is depression and anger. Those are the two are the most common, I think.
Definitely depression. I know when my mom died, I went through very bad depression. And really, it didn't happen until a year later. And I faced some serious depression. I don't think I ever got extremely angry, but I did face that depression. And sometimes it's hard to come out of.
I think one example here from a biblical standpoint is Hannah in 1 Samuel 1, 9-15.
Right.
She was wanting to have a child. I'll read those verses.
Okay.
So Hannah arose, and after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. Right. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. And it happened, so she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxication drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. So she was, the mother of Samuel,
right,
who would become a great judge and prophet.
Yes.
And would anoint David as king.
Right.
And so you can you can see the deep grief because of her infertility and how she felt. And, she prayed fervently.
Yes, she did. Temple. She did. She prayed, and God gave her a son, and she turned around and gave that son back to God in service. And a lot of people, a lot of women look down, and men, I'm sure, look down on her because it kind of would put you as an outcast if you were a woman and could not have a child. Yeah. So, she begged and she pleaded, and God heard her prayer. And for this point, it was an answer of yes.
And the last stage, which is the final one, I think is the acceptance stage.
Yeah.
And the example that I give here is Joseph in Genesis 45.
Okay.
Now, old Joe, he was sold in slavery by his brothers. He was left. They told his father that a wild animal killed him. Ugh. He was accused of things he didn't do. He was put in prison for many years.
Right.
Would end up becoming the prime minister of Egypt.
Yeah.
And so he went through all this, and you can just sense, you read through Genesis 45, that Joseph had a lot of hurt.
He did. He had to have. I mean, because he was mistreated by so many people for so many years. That I'm sure it took him a while to come to that acceptance.
And so his brothers come, and, for a longer explanation, you'll need to read it.
Right.
But in Genesis 45:5, it says, and now do not be distressed, because his brothers were scared of him, because he could have had him executed.
Oh, he could have killed him. Yeah.
Do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you.
Right.
And then he says later, what you meant for evil, God meant for good.
Amen.
And so, ultimately, the whole world was saved through Joseph's injustice,
right,
and his pain.
Yeah.
I want you to think of that for a moment.
Right.
Because if Joseph would not have saved Egypt, he would not have saved his brothers.
Right.
Who one of his brothers was Judah.
Right.
And Jesus would come out of the tribe of Judah.
Yes.
And would not have been able to save the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So he had to ultimately come to that acceptance. Do you feel like the different stages, you said sometimes people will skip them. Do you think people sometimes go back and forth? They're circular. Do you think sometimes people accept it and then all of a sudden go back and are depressed? Do you see that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that there's triggers, right?
Right.
That's why I think definitely being in the Word. I mean, counseling is not is not more important than the Bible.
Oh, the Bible is very important. Yeah.
But counseling with a Christian therapist.
Right.
That can help you integrate some tools that I believe God has allowed men, women to be able to utilize.
Right.
And also integrate Scripture.
And prayer.
Yeah. Because a lot of people don't trust a lot of people to share everything with.
Yeah.
And they hold all this pain in.
Right.
And so when you are able to share that in a non-judgmental, open, trusting environment.
Right.
It's very much takes a lot of weight off.
It does. It really does. It really does. And don't get angry at yourself when you're going through these stages. Don't think, well, I should be at this point and I'm not. Everybody goes through grief differently, and grief hits people differently at different times. Even years later. So there's nothing wrong with you if you're going through these stages and repeating these stages. It's okay. You are facing them, and you just need to walk through them with the help of God.
And there's a sense that grief will always be with us
until we're in heaven,
because this world is not fun.
No, it's horrible.
Okay, and pain is always there. Trauma,
it's inevitable.
So I never tell people it's going to go away, because it's always
okay.
there, right?
Because it's not. Yeah,
but with God, with the faith, and with having people you can talk to,
right?
I believe that. God can take a mess and turn it to a message.
Most definitely.
Been there, done that, and I've witnessed it.
And bought the T-shirt.
I bought the T-shirt. Even made one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a Merry Christmas, and just put Jesus first. Really remember to think about him and focus on him during this holiday season, and give your grief to him. Thank you for listening. Take care.
Have a good one.
Goodbye.